Franklin D. Roosevelt's life was marked by extraordinary privilege, profound personal challenge, and political transformation. Born into wealth and social prominence, he faced the crippling effects of polio at the peak of his early career, yet rose to become the longest-serving U.S. president, leading the nation through the Great Depression and World War II with innovative legislation and wartime leadership. His story intertwines family legacy, private struggle, masterful political maneuvering, and a vision of government as an active force for good. Early life and family wealth. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was born on January 30th, 1882, at Springwood, the family estate in Hyde Park, New York, overlooking the Hudson River. He was the only child of James Roosevelt I, a businessman, and Sarah Ann Delano, both from established New York families of Dutch and French Huguenot descent. James Roosevelt, born in 1828, had built a fortune through railroads, coal, real estate, and finance. He served as vice president of the Delaware and Hudson Railway and president of the Southern Railway Security Company before retiring to manage his estates and investments. Sarah Delano, 26 years younger than her husband, came from the wealthy Delano merchant family involved in the China trade in shipping. Her uncle Warren Delano II had amassed riches from the opium trade in Canton. The Roosevelts' wealth was rooted in 19th century America's economic boom. James's investments in railroads and urban property, combined with Sarah's family fortune, provided financial security that allowed young Franklin to grow up in relative isolation on the 600-acre Springwood estate, tended by servants and attended by tutors. His father's death in 1900, when Franklin was 18, left him an inheritance estimated at several $million, equivalent to tens of millions today, though much of the family wealth was tied up in trusts and property. Franklin's childhood was sheltered and adoring. Sarah doted on her only child, homeschooling him until age 14 and fostering his love of nature, sailing, and history. At Groton School, 1896-1900, he formed a close bond with headmaster Endicott Peabody, who instilled a sense of public service. Harvard, 1900-1904, was less formative academically, but he served as editor of The Crimson and graduated with a C average. Columbia Law School followed briefly, 1904-1907, but he left without graduating after passing the New York bar exam and joining the law firm Carter, Ledyard, and Milburn. Entry into politics and marriage. Politics beckoned early, thanks to family connections and Roosevelt ambition. In 1910, at age 28, he won election to the New York State Senate as a progressive Democrat, upsetting Tammany Hall machine politics with his support for labor reforms and public utilities. Appointed Assistant Secretary of the Navy by President Woodrow Wilson in 1913, he oversaw naval expansion during World War I, championed preparedness, and gained national visibility, drawing comparisons to his distant cousin Theodore Roosevelt. On March 17, 1905, Franklin married Anna Eleanor Roosevelt, Theodore's niece and a distant cousin, in a union arranged partly by family. Eleanor, born in 1884, had a troubled childhood marked by her mother's death, her father's alcoholism, and her own insecurities, but she shared Franklin's reformist zeal. They had 6 children: Anna, 1906, James, 1907, Franklin Jr., 1909, died in infancy, Elliot, 1910, Franklin Jr., 1914, and John, 1916. Eleanor became a tireless social worker and later First Lady, but the marriage faced strains, including Franklin's affair with Lucy Mercer in 1918, which nearly ended it. Eleanor chose to stay for political reasons and family stability. Polio and political comeback. In August 1921, while vacationing at Campobello Island in Canada, Roosevelt contracted a paralytic illness that left him unable to walk without assistance. Initially diagnosed as polio, infantile paralysis, later analyses have suggested Guillain-Barré syndrome, but The effect was the same: paralysis from the waist down. For a rising politician in his prime, the diagnosis was devastating. Roosevelt spent months in therapy, using leg braces, crutches, and eventually a wheelchair in private, while publicly concealing his disability to protect his image. Supported by Eleanor, who took on public roles he could no longer fill, and by Lewis Howe, his political advisor, Roosevelt rebuilt his strength physically and politically. He purchased Warm Springs, Georgia in 1926 and turned it into a rehabilitation center for polio patients, finding both therapy and purpose there. In a letter to Dr. William Eggleston in October 1924, FDR wrote of his own experience. Please excuse my delay in replying to your letter, which has been forwarded to me down here in your neighboring state, where I am spending a few weeks swimming and getting sunlight for my legs. Gentle exercises, especially for the muscles of the back and abdomen, are of great value. In 1928, he won election as governor of New York, serving effectively despite his disability and implementing progressive programs like unemployment relief that foreshadowed the New Deal. 4 terms as president and the New Deal. The Great Depression propelled Roosevelt to the presidency. In 1932, he won a landslide victory over Herbert Hoover, promising a New Deal for the American people. Inaugurated on March 4, 1933, amid bank panics and 25% unemployment, Roosevelt acted decisively. In his first fireside chat, he explained the Banking Holiday and Emergency Banking Act, restoring public confidence. I want to talk for a few minutes with the people of the United States about banking. He began assuring listeners, it is possible that when the people realize that the money they deposit in their banks will be there when they want it, confidence will be restored. The 100 days saw a flood of legislation. The Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC, employed young men in environmental projects. The Agricultural Adjustment Act, AAA, paid farmers to reduce production. The Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, brought electrification and development to the rural South. The National Industrial Recovery Act, NIARA, aimed to stabilize industry through codes and public works. The Federal Emergency Relief Administration, FERA, and later Works Progress Administration, WPA, provided direct relief and jobs for millions. The Social Security Act of 1935 created unemployment insurance, old age pensions, and aid for dependents. Roosevelt's 4 terms, re-elected in 1936, 1940, and 1944, were unprecedented, enabled by the Depression and war. The 22nd Amendment, 1951, later limited presidents to 2 terms.
We have at our disposal the national resources, the money, the skill of hand and head to raise our economic level, our citizens' income. Our capacity is limited only by our ability to work together.
The New Deal fundamentally expanded federal power, creating a welfare state and regulatory apparatus that defined modern liberalism, though critics on the left decried it as insufficiently radical and on the right as overreaching. Wartime presidency. As war engulfed Europe and Asia, Roosevelt shifted focus outward. The Lend-Lease Act 1941 aided Britain and others without direct U.S. entry, and after Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, he became the war leader, coordinating industrial mobilization, rationing, and the arsenal of democracy. With generals like George Marshall and Dwight Eisenhower, he oversaw Allied strategy, meeting Churchill and Stalin at Tehran 1943 and Yalta 1945 to plan victory and post-war arrangements. Domestically, wartime production ended the Depression, employing women in factories, Rosie the Riveter, and interning Japanese Americans in a grave civil liberties failure. Roosevelt died of a cerebral hemorrhage on April 12, 1945, at Warm Springs, aged 63, just months before victory in Europe. Harry Truman succeeded him. Legacy as family man and leader, FDR's family life was complex. Eleanor became a global advocate for human rights, but their marriage was strained by his infidelities and her independence. They maintained a partnership of mutual respect. His children pursued varied paths, with son James entering politics and Elliot serving as a military officer. Roosevelt's legacy endures as architect of the modern American state. The New Deal's programs and wartime leadership preserved democracy amid crisis, reshaping government's role in economy and society while positioning the U.S. as a superpower. His ability to inspire through radio fireside chats and to navigate unprecedented challenges marks him as one of America's most transformative presidents.